That's interesting.
Very interesting.
प्रवीण जी नमस्कार.
नमस्कार जनाब.
नमस्कार.
अभी थोड़े दिन गीले हैं, वो उल्टे करके रखे हैं.
অনেকে জয়েন করে আছে.
मेवाड़ नरेश के क्या हाल हैं? धन्यवाद जी.
So shall we start? Meanwhile, we can start by introduction and welcome address. So the order of the day is like this. First of all,
For another 4-5 minutes.
No, they can join. Meanwhile, we'll give slight background. Okay.
Sure, sir.
So, some of you are new. In the year 2020-21, ITPI RRC has started a lecture series, and the name given by Professor Neeraj Gupta to this lecture series is Philosopher's Take on Sustainable Development. We organized one lecture series last year also. It was on Golden Jubilee celebration of Rajasthan Regional Chapter, which touched various themes differently, starting from post-COVID planning to regional planning, then land pooling and transportation planning, so on and so forth. And this year, we started the first lecture on 2nd of October, and very learned key speakers were Professor S.M. Akhtar from Jamia Millia Islamia, University of Delhi, and Dr. Mansi Bal Bhargav. She is water expert. She joined us from Hyderabad. So this is the second lecture in the series, and today also we have two eminent speakers. But before I move on to that, I will request the chapter chairman to give the welcome address to all the participants. Anawat ji, please unmute your mic. Anawat ji, अपना mic on कर लीजिए. माइक ऑन कर लीजिए. आपका माइक म्यूट है. Before he starts his address, after his welcome address, I will be introducing the speakers of the webinar.
Pradeep sir, unmute.
Professor Dheeraj Gupta is the moderator for this webinar. He is acting Vice Chancellor, Central University of Rajasthan. And first lecture will be delivered by Professor Chetan Vaidya, former Director SK New Delhi. Lecture 2 will be Professor Dr. Joy Sen, Head of Department of Architecture and Regional Planning, IIT Kharagpur. Then we will have floor interventions. After that, the concluding remarks will be given by Professor Neeraj Gupta, moderator, and then vote of thanks by convener of RRC Udaipur Center, Mr. S.K. Shrimali. So this is the order of the day. Now I request Chapter Chairman, please switch on your mic, unmute your mic. I request you to address श्रीमाली जी, माइक को अनम्यूट कीजिए, उसको क्लिक करें रेड वाले को।
हाँ सर, कर दिया सर।
हाँ ठीक है, कैरी ऑन।
आवाज आ रही सर?
हाँ हाँ, धन्यवाद साहब, बोलिए।
हाँ सर, चेयरमैन साहब।
Honorable both the speakers, Sir Sri Professor Chetan Vaidya Sahab and Sri Professor Dr. Joy Sen Sahab and all respected participants. मैं राजस्थान रीजनल चैप्टर की ओर से आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत एवं अभिनंदन करता हूं। इससे पहले कि अपन ये वेबिनार शुरू करें, हमारे 3 मेंबर्स डी भट्टाचार्य साहब एवं रिजवानी साहब, इन 3 मेंबर्स का दुखद देहावसान हो गया। इसके लिए मैं आप सभी से निवेदन करूंगा कि इनके लिए 2 मिनट का मौन रखा है। धन्यवाद।
Mr. B.D. Bhattacharya was fellow member of ITPI and he was the senior most member of Rajasthan Regional Chapter. He retired as Chief Town Planner, Government of Rajasthan. Mr. B.N. Mehra, he was also ex-Chief Town Planner, Government of Rajasthan, and both of them left us recently. And Shri R.N. Rijwani, he retired as Senior Town Planner, Government of Rajasthan, and all of them were senior members of Rajasthan Regional Chapter, ITPI. We lost them, and I pray on behalf of ITPI RRC that God bless them, God bless peace to the departed soul. Thank you. So with this,
मैं सबसे पहले
हाँ सर बोलिए।
मैं सबसे पहले प्रोफेसर चेतन वैद्य साहब एवं डॉक्टर जॉय सेन साहब का बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूं कि उन्होंने बहुत ही शॉर्ट टाइम में हमारे नीरज गुप्ता साहब और प्रदीप कपूर साहब की रिक्वेस्ट पर इस आज की वेबिनार में अपना जो है स्पीच देने के लिए सहमति प्रदान की। आज जो आप स्पीच देने जा रहे हैं उसका जो थीम है, सब्जेक्ट है, वो फिलोसॉफी ऑफ डेवलपिंग सस्टेनेबल हैबिटेट्स इस पर हम आपके विचारों से और पूरा आरआरसी आपके विचारों से बहुत ही लाभान्वित होंगे। साथ ही मैं प्रदीप कपूर साहब एवं हमारे मॉडरेटर प्रोफेसर नीरज गुप्ता साहब का भी बहुत बहुत आभार व्यक्त करता हूं कि इन्होंने बहुत ही शॉर्ट टाइम में 2 महीने ही नहीं हुए कि ये दूसरा लेक्चर का सीरीज आयोजित करवाई है, और हमें पूरा विश्वास है कि आरआरसी को आप दोनों का सहयोग इसी प्रकार से मिलता रहेगा। आप सभी का बहुत बहुत आभार एवं नववर्ष की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं। धन्यवाद। अब मैं मॉडरेटर प्रोफेसर नीरज गुप्ता विद्युत करा।
Thank you, Kanawat Saab. It's a privilege for me to be here today. And let me share the secret of today's session. In fact, something that we started on 2nd of October, the philosopher's take on sustainable habitat. This idea originated during a discussion of our school board, and the first person who kind of has seeded this idea is Dr. Joy Sen. When we were looking at certain curriculum and all, and we came to that, how do we really talk about sustainability from the Western perspective, while there is so much of wealth and heritage in our own nation. There is a very, very rich Indian heritage available on various aspects of architecture, planning, design, and sustainability, that we started discussing this. In fact, that has to doing so many things. We at the Central University of Rajasthan, when we began this master's program in sustainable architecture, our tagline is blending traditional wisdom with technology. And that somehow rang a very strong bell. So the two members who were there, Joy Sen and Mansi Bal, and if I may admit, major discussions of certain points, and we evolved something really brilliant. And Joy, if you recall, you have promised that you are putting up a course which will take on NPTEL and other things. So you had mentioned that. So very soon we'll come up with this thing. The whole background of this I mentioned, and with this background we started off. He said there are great Indian philosophers, whether it be Rabindranath Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi, there are many, many of them, right from the traditional wisdom, and our ancient scriptures are filled of such wisdom. Chanakya ages back talked about the planning, and I still read those lines, and he says how a city should be planned. And one of the first things that he said was that before planning a city, the king must make sure that you create a habitat for people who are coming from various parts of the country, and they will be the labor force developing the city. He writes कि कुछ ना कुछ लोग जो शहर बनाने आते हैं वो वहीं पर वास करेंगे, तो सबसे पहला प्रयास उनके लिए आवास बनाने का हो, तभी शहर जो है सक्सेसफुल हो पाएगा. So such wisdom is available and such line of guidance is available. With that idea we started this program, and I'm grateful that it is really taking shape in forms, because one thing is very clear: the moment I talk about this idea to anybody, people wholeheartedly come up and say, yes, I am willing there. I can tell you, I can confess, and even with this sort of a complaint with Professor Joy Sen, whenever I wanted him for a formal session for our program, he was hesitant. But the moment I talked to him about this, I sent him this text. Within, I think, an hour, he said, yes, I am available. You give me the dates. So it is a love and passion for that subject that is there. And no wonder, I mean, of course, he is a chairman of the Center of Excellence for the Indian Knowledge Systems by Government of India. That's one of the very amazing faith that he has. The science and heritage and future of cities, two major programs that he is carrying forward, and they are all, so we can really see that these things are close to the heart. Same thing I can say about Chetan. Chetan has been I think Kapoor Saab talked to him about Gandhian philosophy and talks, and this he immediately agreed. In fact, he went on further ahead that I can get you this person and this. So that is a really love that we have, and we said, come on, hold on, today we will have you, and then we'll have more of us into this. So we have launched this series. The first series was very successful, and I believe that so many things that we do spontaneously are far more fruitful than very, very well-planned things. And that is what brings us together. I think at this point I'll stop and request Kapoor Saab to formally introduce the two giants that we have before us. I just wanted to touch base with them. One thing I missed out, that Joy is wonderful musician too. And when I send this message to many people that he's lecturing, I can tell you, Joy, that 4 of your ex-students, he says, oh, wow. That's the first thing. Is he going to sing also? Or is he going to play sitar also? These are the messages that I have in my inbox. So which I am sure one of these days we'll have you with the sitar also on the platform. On the online will give us this opportunity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Neeraj Gupta. I think we'll squeeze our addresses and so that we get some time and use that time for his music also.
Yes.
Right. Today, both the speakers are so eminent. They need no introduction. But for the new generation in Rajasthan Regional Chapter, still I would like to introduce both of them. Professor Chetan Vaidya, he is former director, NIUA first, then director, School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and also for some time he was director, School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal. He was working there as additional responsibility given to him. He was with us as chairman in AICTE, chairman of All India Board of Town and Country Planning Education, and we had good time there with Professor Chetan. He was distinguished Alumni Award by IIT Kharagpur in 2015, and he was also independent director of Housing and Urban Development Corporation, which known as HUDCO, during 2016-2019, and presently he is senior national urban advisor with the Kochi Smart City project supported by GIZ. Right now he is in Vadodara, but working for Kochi Smart City. So once again I extend my sincere thanks to Professor Chetan. On one call, he immediately agreed to deliver his lecture today. I am really thankful to you. Dr. Joyce Singh is another very learned speaker for the day. He is professor in Department of Architecture and Planning, Regional Planning, IIT Kharagpur, my alma mater. He is currently head of department there. And his areas of working, if I start reading, will waste a lot of time. But I would like to touch that his area of research are community and regional planning analysis and programming and architecture and planning related heritage studies and documentation. He has a long working experience with various environmental design programs under DFID, Government of United Kingdom. He has also worked in Sustainability Research Center, University of Tokyo, Japan. He has frontline publications with top Springers and Elsevier journals and a major publication in Tibetan studies. He has been associated with Asia Pacific Network of Housing Research. So, we take this opportunity to hear both the speakers of the day, and I hope all of us will be benefited with their lectures today. Thank you. Over to Professor Neeraj Gupta. Sir, mic. Unmute your mic.
unmute. So slowly we'll pick up. Yeah. So I would request Chetan to throw some light on various aspects of traditional Indian wisdom that we have. And one thing that I can share with you, I've had a privilege of working very closely with Chetan when he was director in IUA, and many things amongst others that we discussed was that how we can use all the planning and other principles for helping the last person on the line, So though he was working on the USAID project, but the whole emphasis was on environmental upgradation and so many things, and it was a sheer pleasure. And all I'll say, adding to his introduction, that he is a true Gandhian by practice and his life, and that is an example that is set, and which is very clearly reflected in the values that he inculcated amongst the students when he was director both at SPA and also at Bhopal. So without much ado, I request Chetan to kindly enlighten us with your words, and it will be a privilege to hear you once again, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank ITPI Rajasthan for this opportunity. I think I also thank particularly Shri B.S. Kanawat, Satishji, Pradeep Kapoor, and it's wonderful to see so many friends, though online. It's a nice experience after such a long time. We are at least able to see and hear each other. And I also particularly thank Rajasthan ITPI for this opportunity to interact with Joy Sen and Neeraj, who are very old friends, very, very old friends. The topic which you have chosen, Neeraj, I knew it is you. It's not an easy topic to speak on. The whole idea
it's
of...
not me, it is Joy's. It is Joy's baby,
okay,
sir.
Okay, Joy, then I can excuse Joy.
he was the one who told the lead.
It made me read about philosophy, actually. It let me read, and I think it means love of wisdom. I really realize it means love of wisdom. It's an ancient Greek word. It is study of general and fundamental problems such as connected with reality, existence, knowledge, and mind. And I believe Mahatma Gandhi is true philosopher who we need to learn much more, as mentioned by Neeraj and our ancient past. We as urban planners and regional planners need to learn a lot from Mahatma's teachings, and also, of course, from our own forefathers. And the most important quote in today's context, in sustainability context for Mahatma Gandhi is, the world is enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. I think something which is very, very true, more true in the context of COVID-19 than any time before. And when it comes to sustainable development, it is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. I think that is extremely important, and this also tells us how Mahatma Ji, or Bapuji, as we call him in Gujarat, was ahead of many of us, even ahead of so many of us. And then I come down to Sustainable Development Goals, which is accepted by the UN General Assembly to meet universal goals by 2030, which is 17 SDGs and 169 targets. These universal goals have to be localized for each country and maybe perhaps for each city, with particular reference to planning, design, and implementation of policies and programs. And the most important thing, which is most relevant today than many years ago, is leave no one behind. And I think that is the thing behind SDG goals, leave no one behind. Fortunately, in India, we are already committed to this principle through our expression of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. And most SDG targets functions are for local governments. I think it's very important to understand, though it's a national subject, it's a state subject, but where you need to do it is at the local government level. And given the rate of urbanization, the then UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon sent a clear message: our struggle for global sustainability will be won or lost in cities. I think we need to keep that in mind, and our local bodies have to play a very crucial role. So any roadmap for localizing SDGs to have to keep that in mind, and we need to have support of cities and regions to deliver this 2030 agenda, which means awareness raising, advocacy, implementation, and monitoring. For urban planners or regional planning, the most important goal is SDG 11, which says make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, and resilient. To achieve this goal, there is need to have a paradigm shift on cities of today and plan the way we plan and manage it. Any discussion of this kind, I am a little going beyond what Neeraj, you are trying to give me the frame. We need to think of even philosophers like Karl Marx and John Keynes. It is worthwhile to mention here the differences between communism and capitalism. In capitalist economy, production is determined by free market forces, supply and demand. In communist economy or the left economy, the government determines which goods and services to get produced and how much available at any given time. Fortunately, we have a mixed economy. I would prefer to call this as welfare state and market-oriented strategy, two different kinds of approaches. And if you had all under a welfare state, public sector would have provided and decided what is the minimum level of housing, who will provide this, both housing and infrastructure, to all groups of people, at what price. Whereas in the market-based system, the housing and infrastructure will be provided by private developers at free cost, and public sector would only regulate. In our system of mixed economy, housing for the poor should be provided by government at a reasonable or affordable price, and households could be taken care of by a regulated private market. So I think we need to understand these two philosophies and the mixed economy we are talking about. I would like to further illustrate this. I think, Neeraj, I would like to illustrate with my work in recent with USAID, which you mentioned recently, which was on charging urban water supply. I think that would explain it much easier. If we assume that average water requirement for a household and an average is 120 liters per person, LPCD, we also expect that the delivery system has to be equitable, efficient, and effective. In a welfare state approach, everybody will get a certain amount of water, maybe 70, 80 LPCD at a low price, not paying for the actual price. And it would lead to inefficient and non-accountable delivery of services. If it is a monopoly of the government, as we call it sometimes. And in public sector, we all know this happens. If it was a market-based system, then people who could afford it could only get the services. So these are the two extremes. But in a mixed economy system, we talk of three levels of supply. One is minimum lifeline supply. You call it 30 LPCD because at that level of low level of LPCD, I think the demand for water is non-elastic. People are willing to pay any price, the way we pay what price for the water bottle, the drinkable water bottle. That should be the minimum level, should be almost free at a very low price. Some figure like 30 to 90 LPCD at the cost price, it should pay for itself. And 90 LPCD above should be at a charge at a high rate, which should be used to cross-subsidize the poor. So we are talking of a system which takes care of itself. It is not a burden on the government. Unfortunately, which is very unfortunate, the urban planning is often not integrated with the markets. Focus on the control rather than encouraging development, which is market-oriented. In India, we have a free or open economy, much more open economy. The Prime Minister, the Finance Minister Manmohan Singh had introduced, and now recently we also opened up. We tried to open up our farm sector, but urban sector is still not opened up enough. I think we need to look at this enough. As far as sustainability is concerned, the market-based urban planning approach will mean land use to be integrated with public transport. There should be higher variable floor space index and also marketable FSI beyond a certain point. Moreover, land should be reserved for affordable housing to provide for mixed land use. There should be special focus on planning and management of public spaces. This becomes more particular in the context of COVID-19. And area-based should be densification, redevelopment, green project, and should not be isolated project. What is happening in smart city, they should be part of an overall city development strategy. And here, again, as urban planners, we have not understood the importance of this information communication technology. I think very limited way our integrated command and control centers, which help the cities to monitor and give messages to citizens during the COVID-19. They are acting as war rooms. They were treated as white elephant, but suddenly you realize they were useful. But that is something we need to do at much larger scale and at an affordable price, not at this scale. So we'll have to, Indians have enough brains to talk. If we tell them that this is a problem, there are enough people, particularly the youngster, to give a solution. But are we ready to give those solutions to those questions and challenges to them? Our site is again high. We have high risk in terms of natural, man-made climate change impacts, and urban planning and environment control should address these issues. Integration of climate resilience agenda has to be systematically built into our systems to receive desired results. Now, moreover, planning of our cities should be inclusive. A more inclusive city is not that it is without slums or without poor, but we should manage our poor to face the poverty. It would mean recognizing the informal activities and integrating informal and slum settlements in city management processes. I think we all know on the 22nd of March, when we had declared the lockdown and we saw this thousands and millions of people. I think many of us didn't know that there are so many migrants who are no base in the cities, I think something. And in this context, this whole work on Atmanirbhar Bharat and National Urban NULD, National Urban Livelihood Mission, which talks about vendor parcelcy, affordable schemes for rental housing, and also the new Seva Nidhi. I think they are very important. They are steps in the right direction, but they again need to be integrated with urban planning. I think they seems to be isolated, going to different ways. Now here again, when I said market forces, not that nothing is happening in this sector. There are two approaches we are linked to urban planning with markets. Attempts have been made to link them with the markets. These are transferable development rights and transit-oriented development. Both are now national level accepted policies. Now, TDR means making available certain amount of additional built-up area in lieu of area surrendered by the owner of the land, so that he can use extra built-up area either or transfer it to another need for the extra built-up area for a integrated urban approach. Similarly, transit-oriented development, which is actually on the railway stations or the places where the mass transit is stopping. It means integrated urban places designed to bring people, activities, building public spaces together with easy walking, cycling connection with the transit-oriented development. And it also has mixed land use. And these are the kind of two strategies are being worked out, and both has certain advantages, but we have to be very careful in regulating. Just increasing FSI at the TOD is not going to help. It has to have all those regulations and it has to be implemented properly. I personally believe that regulations and building bylaws are providing more private open spaces rather than public open spaces. And this is something which is confirmed by SEP studies. One can always refer to this. This is the most relevant context in the context of disaster of COVID-19. Both urban regional planning, urban regional development and plan formulation guidelines of 2014, which is called as URDFI guidelines of 2014, and the model building bylaws 2016 needs to be reviewed in this context. I think both needs to be reviewed, and there are lessons elsewhere. Let me go back to Mahatma Gandhi again, who said sanitation is more important than independence. He made cleanliness and sanitation as an integral part of Gandhian way of life. His dream was total sanitation. Cleanliness is the most important for physical being and a healthy environment. Swachh Bharat mission is the right step in this direction. I think we have taken steps in the direction of Mahatma Gandhi, and we want to make ODF, open defecation free settlements, and construction of toilet. I think that has happened very well, and there are very many successful stories. But it's not enough to construct a toilet. I think we need to understand it's also changing human behavior. I think that is something which needs to be kept in mind. Equally important is how the septage is treated. I'm now staying in Kerala for almost 2 years now. Almost every house has a toilet. But if you see below the toilet, the waste in the septic tanks is not scientifically treated. So what is happening is that your groundwater is getting polluted. Fortunately, as Kerala people, they drink water which is hot. They always boil the water hot. So disease is not happening because of polluted groundwater, but it's extremely simple. And fortunately, the national government has recently said that it is not enough to be ODF. You also need to be ODF++. That includes sludge treatment as an additional indicator. Now, I'm going to take it step back further from this. So in this whole process, we have now what is called as fecal sludge treatment plants, which are low cost and decentralized treatment. And they are much more useful, require less space than conventional money and conventional treatment plants, which are expensive and almost everywhere underutilized. You're building these white elephants which are underutilized. And that is where some cities are now talking of co-treatment of sewage in the sewage treatment plant, where the sludge is transferred by private operators through their trucks. This is also requires this kind of assessment of current septic tank emptying, conveyance, discharge practices, and dealers mechanical of suction vehicles, which are operated by private operators. And then they are put into STPs, which are underutilized. Here again, the private operators are linked to consumer households by an app, and all trucks have GPS system. So what I'm saying is there is philosophy of cleanliness, which we need to implement. There is technology, which we need to understand, which is affordable technology, not the conventional technology. And finally, we need to bring in this whole ICT issue. All three have to put together for our integrated delivery of urban services. So that just having a theory is not enough. You need to have science. You need to have a delivery system which has modern technology. That is ICT. Now, Gandhiji's concept of democratic decentralization is strong Panchayati Raj or village Swaraj. He wanted to see each village a little republic, self-sufficient in its vital wants, organic and non-hierarchy linked. It's very important. Organic and non-hierarchy linked with special bodies or cities enjoying maximum freedom of deciding affairs of the locality. It could be not village, it could be even a ward committee in present context. Our 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments of 1992 were a step towards Panchayati Raj or Swaraj as envisioned by Bapuji for empowering local government. Particularly talking about 74th constitutional amendment, which came into force in June 1993, was a step to empower and strengthen urban decentralization. It was great. It was a roadmap for decentralization, great devolution of power to state and local bodies. Implementation is still slow by the state government. Many states have not handed over local functions of the 12th schedule, financing and functionaries to their local urban body. Again, I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with Kerala. The local governments in Kerala give you a different picture. See, they, as early as 74th Constitution, as early as 1996, the Kerala government, whichever party it was, a Congress or Communist, whichever party is there, they have decided to hand over 30 to 40% of total resources to be spent, planned and spent by the local government, both urban and rural. And that is something which gave them power, gave them financial powers. They also transferred lot of functions, particularly sub-centers, primary health center, education center, to local self-government. The local self-government in Kerala are different than other places. They also have relatively better staff strength. And that is one of the reasons why in the phase 1 and 2, Kerala did better for COVID-19 management than many. Phase 3, they also had problems. Now, not only that, the city mayors have executive powers in Kerala. They don't, the city governments in Kerala, city corporation government are not managed by municipal commissioner appointed by the state government. In Kochi, I have met mayors in last 2 years so many times. I think I met the commissioner, who is called secretary, only 2 or 3 times. I mean, but I have one-to-one relation with the mayor, which is unlike what happened in Baroda or Ahmedabad or Surat or that format of Maharashtra. So it is managed by the elected mayors. And moreover, Federation of Women Self-Help Groups, they work very closely in delivery of services with the municipal corporation, which is called Kudamshri. So Kudamshri mission is another parallel system of delivery of services, and all this, and then they have strong ward committees, they have strong neighborhood committees, and all that has come together to enforce social distancing protocols, awareness of programs, and break the chain. Now, this is all is happening in Kerala because of strong local government, both in terms of finances, staff, and function. Now, unfortunately, municipal local bodies and the Town Planning Act, the Municipal Act and the Town Planning Act are not generally integrated together. We treat them as 2 different things, and there are examples after example. That is not the case to some extent in Kerala. Now, in my opinion, town planning should be handed over to the urban local bodies and not managed by development authorities. And in this context, I want to make a controversial statement that the Smart City Special Purpose Vehicle set up under the Smart City Mission was a mistake. I think we made a great mistake. It should have been managed by the urban local bodies, or at the most by the existing development authorities. In
it has become very stressed, and really our approach is.
Can I finish? Can I finish? Okay. Also, India is a very diverse country. I think we really right. Even urban India is very large and very diverse. Different kind of cities, different regions, different cultures. So one size solution to all state is not going to work. Particularly in the context, again, COVID-19, we realize that we need to understand the local system, local culture, local demography to really take COVID management or disaster management issues. And those cities who understand it very well have managed it very well. And finally, I like to close my remarks with this saying that urban planning should be environmentally friendly, more market oriented. I'm not saying hand it over to the market, more market orientation, but it should take care of the poor and informal sector. This will be the approach which could be called as urban development with human face. This will lead to sustainable and inclusive habitat development in India. Thank you so much, Neeraj and other colleagues.
Thank you, Chetan. I'll applaud on everybody's side, and wonderful thing. The 2 D words that you gave us, data analytics, the order of the day, and the democratic decentralization, and that's something really wonderful. And the other part of it, it's not only democratic decentralization, but the decentralization of the physical services also, that DWATs and all the other things that people are talking about, the technology is being available. I think we have to come back from those American ways of completely centralized systems to a lot of decentralization. And one thing for sure, if COVID has really taught us that, how do we isolate that and zones and things like that, etc., etc. So without getting into this, the other component was really amazing and wonderfully placed, that it is not only the philosophy of cleanliness that will matter, but the technology that will support it and how we implement it together. So which brings back to, like I said, I'm so happy to hear this word, blending the Indian wisdom with the modern technology is what we are talking about, and that is what philosophers' take is. And no wonder that some of these philosophers were much beyond our times, including Mahatma Gandhi, as you mentioned. So over to you, Joy sir. Let's have the delight of hearing from you, and it will be amazing. Mansi Bal has joined, and I can tell you among the 3 people, Mansi was also the person who gave up this talk. So in fact, we debated on the English grammar of it. It is philosophers take on or in, things like that. And then we came up with this whole idea. Thank you so much, Mansi, for joining. So, Joy, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I'll just share a little presentation.
Wonderful.
Of mine. I think if you compare a small wave to a huge sea of experience, or if you just take out a page of a book from the whole book, or if you compare a small junior person to a very senior person, so that's what Joy's talk will be to Professor Chetan Vaidya, and who is in the journey of the Mahaprasthan. Yeah, I mean, Chetan is actually our Yudhishthir, and all our micro Nakuls and Shahadevs, in the whole, the whole deal, right? But finally, sustainable habitat takes care of the last person in the line. So I am included. So I'm very happy. That's what, yeah. So that's what, I just wanted to make sure that you can see the slide, and yeah, I hope everybody can see the slide. Yeah, it's visible. And
yeah, make it slideshow. Make it slideshow.
Yeah, just a sec. Yeah, and I'll just go to the slideshow. Is this a full slide? You can see? Yeah.
Right.
Right. Okay. So I think most of what this presentation is going to share with all of you has been covered by Professor Chetan Vaidya, and a man of years and experience, and he is our distinguished alumnus. But I think that's not so important. What is more important about Professor Vaidya is that he is a man of plain living and high to very high thinking, and also action plans, just not thinking, but also action plans. Because
somebody is printing additional, I mean, somebody is using the telephone to connect, and by mistake it gets connected all over again.
Okay.
You have to again share your screen.
Okay, I have to redo it.
Please share your screen again, sir.
Okay, I'll do it again.
Shivashunagam sab, I think you need to be careful with your fingers on your touchpad.
Yeah, Shivaji has to come out, then only I can present.
Yeah, so like
he has to stop sharing, and then only I can come out.
Yeah, now you can restart. Share your screen. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we got it. Now presentation mode.
Yeah, now I'll go to presentation mode. Okay. Yeah. So now I think I'm sustainable. Yeah, I became a little unsustainable. Okay. So I really enjoyed the conversation with Professor Neeraj Gupta. But before that, I must thank very esteemed senior planner D.S. Kanwadji, Satishji, and of course our very near and dear esteemed planner secretary ITPI Pradeepji, and all the senior members who are here. My pranam to all of them, and of course a lot of young stars. I can see some of them. So this presentation is a small one, and as Professor Vaidya said, I mean, sustainability in the last 30 to 35 years has become like a big word in the domain of planning, in ecosystems, in ecology, in behavioral planning, in psychology, in environmental sciences, and even it has entered the world of other social sciences, which borders on different scientific principles. So it is not a new thing that today we are talking about sustainability, but when we talk about sustainable habitat, it becomes something which is very important. And as Professor Vaidya said, the Agenda 11 of the SDG goals of the United Nations very specifically looks into the sustainable cities and its communities, and a lot of work and a lot of thought has actually gone there. So this particular slide shows the plethora, the huge gamut of work that has gone in, from habitat to make strategies which will make habitat sustainable, and different organizations around the world, from USHD to our own TERI in India and many others, and even various organizations at the municipal level has worked on sustainability as a whole, and very specifically on sustainable habitat. There is a very interesting thing which was evident with what Professor Vaidya had said and what Professor Gupta has already said, is actually the change that should come to us before we change the environment. That's very important. If you look at the immense life of Mahatma Gandhiji, if you look at the immense life of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore or Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and all others, I mean, they are the spokesmen of a 10,000 years or even older civilization of India, straight from the times of the Vedic rishis, the Vashishthas or the Agasthyas and the Kashyapas and and the Gautamas. Sage Gautama particularly was a sage of sustainability because he talked about Madhu Vidya, Madhu Vata Ritayate, Madhu Sharanti Sindhava. So if you look at that sloka of Rig Veda very closely, it talks about an ecological correspondence between the huge and the small, between the sunlight and the little fruit which is going to grow in your backyard, and the little Agni which is going to come in the evening times with the setting sun, when you're going to take that fruit inside your kitchen and do a little fruit juice out of it. But this kind of habits has sort of slipped off from our day-to-day, the habits and habitation complementarities. We wait for a frozen fruit coming from, some material which we order through an Amazon, which probably has been packed 6 days back, and there's a certain date we may question. So we get into the closures of these kind of linkages, which makes the whole word sustainable very, very, very questionable. So we are caught between a certain side of modernity, which is not sustainable, and also a certain side of tradition, which is also not sustainable, because a lot of portion of us tradition through the Middle Ages had got corrupted, and some people think it's superstitious, and some people think it's not acceptable at the present time. So the need of the hour today is to pick up those things from the modern systems which are sustainable and combine with those systems from the traditional past which are sustainable. So for that, we need a wonderful clinical eye, a right teaching, and a right practice. We need a combination of the eye within, the right thought, and the right practice. Until and unless we're able to combine the three together, the wisdom, along with our own simple life and a life with a very high thinking and practice. If you look at Swami Vivekananda, he was just not a yogi or a philosopher, but he's one person who gets into a dialogue with Sir Jamshedji Tata, and he's talking about India's industrialization on the one hand, and he's also working on Palli Mangal, which is very close to what Lokmanya Tilak or Gandhiji has said almost a few decades later. So he's a man of word, and he's also a man of practice. So if you can bridge the two worlds, you become sustainable. Now that's what is missing today. We are spending a lot of time in cold rooms with our laptops and algorithms and crunching data, which is all fine. That's all fine, but that cannot take up our entire approach. Analytics cannot take up the entire approach. Practice alone cannot take up the entire approach. Theories and principles alone cannot take up the entire approach. We need to bridge the three worlds together. That's what is the need of the hour, and that's what makes a little house sustainable, a habitat sustainable. Because what is a little house? It is one small unit where a little child will grow, and where his or her mind is without fear, and his head is held high, in the words of Gurudev Tagore. So even a small house, which is a unit of planning, where the mother sustains a child with the right care and the right guidance and the right direction, needs to be designed. And this is today a part of what we call sensible planning, which is a more larger extension of the livable habitat agenda or livable planning that we talk about today. So that means we need to have a combination of the very large with the very small, like what Gandhiji had said again and again, and the Gandhi of the West, Schumacher, has said again and again, small is beautiful, like Mies van der Rohe had said, less is more. So within the very large scheme of things, within the huge town planning regions that we are planning, we need to discover the small zones, and as Chetanji was saying, come down to the municipal levels and look at our backyards and see how the backyard of one house is going to be linked with the backyard of the second house, and how the sewage and the sewage is being taken to the green field beyond the city, and how much is our participation in all that, and how a portion of that becomes a wonderful place of pisciculture of fish, and how another portion becomes an orchard, and the rest becomes a green field of the city. So connections from the backyard to the greens of the city, So these chains of understanding practices is actually at the footnote of sustainability. If you look at the Sabarmati ashram of Mahatma Gandhiji, I mean, that is exactly what you find. He's collecting salt from the Dandi March, and he's talking to his own people on the Charka about sustaining the production of India's largest technology sector, which is weaving, which has given computer science the language of 0 and 1. That's the Jacquard's loom, from where computer science has actually got its ideas of what is 0 and what is 1, the punch card system, and everything has come from a technology, a science, and a practice, a home industry, a looming industry, a cottage industry, which India has fathomed for thousands and thousands of years. And if we look at India today, how much of looming and weaving is actually sustained within our daily cottage? For that, we need to look at one particular country specifically, which is Japan, which is so modern, and it has taken up all the best things of the West, but yet it is so powerful in design, in local solutions, in really configuring a small portion of the telephone that it makes. So everything is complete. So design has to be a part of the sustainable urban habitat. So with this, I'll just go on to a little basis, 4 slides, which I normally share with a lot of people. If somebody has seen this before, it's fine, but maybe someone will see it for the first time. We have a problem right now because we have a reductionist view, and this problem is fourfold. At the socio-cultural level, we have LSDs, we have lifestyle disorders. We are getting up from the bed much later, we are going to bed much later. So we have lost the circadian rhythm like our grandfather or our great-grandfather. We are talking about Gandhiji, but we are not like Gandhiji or Tagore, who used to get up at 4 o'clock and start their community services right at 4 o'clock. How many of us do that? Because we have lost our circadian rhythm. We have lost the climatic balance, and we have created geopolitical crisis, and last and not the least of all is the economic crisis. So these 4 has created a huge mismatch. This is Jose Stiglitz, the price of inequality. Everybody knows about this, and this makes developments unsustainable. I mean, about 90% of the resources and wealth is in the hand of 10% of global population, and it's just the reverse, and that makes the whole world inequitable and unsustainable. If you look at the geopolitical crisis, Israel, for example, I don't want to be specific, and the Middle East has shaken hands more than 10 or 12 times, yet they have lost their faith in each other. Why? Because the shaking of hands has not come from the deepest of faith and understanding that we are one common humanity. So even United Nations and some of the superpowers have failed again and again, and huge amount of money is going into piles of ammunition building. And India spends about 35% of its resources just to protect it from other neighbors. This money could have gone to that last man in the line, which Professor Gupta was talking about, so beautifully at the outset of the speech. So these are serious problems, in our attitude, in the way we are. We talk big, but we don't think big. That's the whole problem. Climate, of course, when this man had actually made a movie more than 30 years back, The Inconvenient Truth, the whole world laughed at him. When I was a student of planning in the US, one of his books was our textbook, and he was not very famous. He was not yet a vice president, but he talked sense, and his books meant a lot. And today we can see the effects, the Californian wildfire, even fire in the Siberian forest. It makes habitats, absolutely unsustainable, absolutely unsustainable. If you look at a corner of Kolkata or a corner of Yamuna, somewhere in Delhi, every portion of these 2 cities is unsustainable. The 2 cities, that's how Charles Correa has portrayed Mumbai, 50% slums and 50% high rises. That is the kind of urban development that we boast of today. It's absolutely an unsustainable thought, and it's a climatic disaster. And last but not the least is socio-cultural delinkages, the lifestyle disorders. And this is one of the most important person in the West right now, whose theories are almost everywhere, from management to planning, from economics to ecology. He is Abraham Maslow. And I think we all know Maslow actually transferred Sri Aurobindo's hierarchy of mind to his hierarchy of needs. There are books on that. And it became a very important agenda in planning and management in the West. And it's still so for about 30 to 40 years. But how much of Maslow we really follow? Because we are stuck only at the physical level, and we have not able to exercise the simple things which Gandhiji or Gurudev Tagore has talked about, which is the moral and ethical level. And then a much higher level is the spiritual or the religious level. And we directly talk about spirit and religion without having our moral and ethical foundation. So there's a disconnect between our material foundations and the huge philosophies in India that we have. One of the reasons why this country collapsed in the medieval ages is that the moral and the ethical, the intermediate link was absolutely displaced. And when the British came to this country, the first thing that they want to make sure, that Napoleon onslaught or whatever we call it, was to actually break the moral and the ethical backbone of the average citizenry of India. And then everybody, including I and perhaps my family, we got half or almost corrupted. And today, the Indian governance, the Indian practices are embedded in corruption. So no matter what we conceive or what we do, about 80% of resources, energy, and everything gets wasted in the dark lanes of corruption. So this is the socio-cultural disaster. And this is where everything gets unsustainable. And so we think only in a line. Look at this pendulum, which is actually moving up and down. And the problem with many of us, including I, is that we just look at things linearly. We think, I am a planner and he is a physicist, so I have no concerns with him, and vice versa. He is a chemist and I am a biosocial engineer, so we don't work together. I don't need him, he doesn't need me. But we don't know that everybody needs everybody in a society, and we are all a part of a tree, a large statistical dendrogram. And it's not linear, it's actually a huge cycle which is moving on, and the line is just a projection of the cycle itself. So we need to understand life cycles, we need to understand the cycles of time, we need to understand what is there in the past, and we need to understand how we look into the future. So a lot of our actions in the governances and a lot of our research and academics in the institute has forgotten the role of time. Now, Indian philosophy, the Charka of Mahatma Gandhiji or the poetry of Rabindranath Tagore is all about time, They have talked about time again and again. I mean, Gandhiji has said, be the change that you like to see outside. So it's a matter of time. Let me the change first, and then I expect the change to happen outside. So it's a matter of time. We have inverted time. I mean, I am teaching my student, but I don't practice what I'm teaching. So there's a gap between theory and practice, and that's real. It really brings about a tremor or a gap and makes everything unsustainable. I mean, we have the money, we have the analytics, we have the governance. Good things are happening, but yet things are not falling at the right place, and everything is becoming unsustainable. So I've just taken up some quick things. I'm not going to get into these. These are available on the net. So a sustainable habitat has to be deep ecological and biocentric. I'll just catch up on these two words. What do you mean by deep ecological? I mean, the kind of things, I belong to MCP, so we are students of MCP. I mean, there's some other group in IIT Kharagpur, they belong to physics, so they're students of physics. But when they come to RK Hall of Residence, there's nothing like group of physics or group of MCP. I mean, we are in a certain wing or in a certain hall, or we are all together. So when we look at both the connections, I mean, our connections in the department and also our connections in the hall and our connections as IITians, like Professor Chetan Vaidya is a senior IITian and Joy Sen is a junior IITian. So a junior IITian must know how to behave with a senior IITian. So this is just not an ecosystem, this is a deep ecosystem. So what comes out of this is Shraddha, which is respect. So if Shraddha is not there, so Shraddha is at the foundation of our sustainable habitat. And it has to be biocentric. What is bio? That is life. There's a connect between the bee and the sun, and there's a connect between the bee and the honeycomb, because the bee only takes out the juice of the flower. It's not honey, but then the bee stores it in a swarm box, which is called the honeycomb, and by virtue of sunlight, it processes the flower juice into honey, and it makes it immortal, and that's why it's called madhu, and that's why Rishi Gautama, one of the Sapta Rishis of the Rig Veda, says madhubata ritayate, because madhu is immortal. It can be stored for hundreds and thousands of years. So madhu is sustainable. It's actually the foundation of immortality. It's actually the foundation of an ecological niche, like an honeycomb. So even in our Upanishads, the habitats of rishis are described as a honeycomb. And even in the modern ecosystems research, swarm intelligence, swarm ecosystems are also described as the honeycomb's rest. So you see, something which is very ancient in India has been rediscovered in the West. For the West, it is actually an invention, but for India, it's actually a discovery. It was already there, but for some unfortunate reason, we got delinked from our extremely rich past. A sustainable habitat, as Professor Vaidya said, it was already so evident in what he said, is actually a spirit of coming together. Unless and until a regional planner is able to work with an urban planner in conjunction with a field anthropologist and an environmental scientist and a product designer and an engineer and also an architect and of course a politician, then sustainability will never happen. So we must understand the spirit of coming together. So just not teaching courses in an institute or practicing projects very well, but we should learn from how Mahatma Gandhiji moved with millions of people, and how Gurudev Rabindranath inspired thousands of people, how Madan Mohan Malviya ji created a fantastic university with thousands of professors, which is the BHU, which is absolutely on the Indian ethos. So this is something that we need to understand, which is the spirit of consortium and cooperation. I mean, I am better than him, so that's competition, but I need to learn something from him, that's cooperation. The moment I have that attitude, I begin to cooperate. And the moment I begin to cooperate, I become sustainable because I'm a part of the whole. I become non-linear. I mean, I'm just not linear. I don't think I am the only person who knows everything. I need to learn so many things from Professor Neeraj Gupta. I need to learn so many things from Professor Chetan Vaidya, and so on and so on. So I am always a student and always a student. I'm never a teacher. And I may be a senior student. That's the only difference with other students of mine in the class. I mean, the only difference is by the degree of seniority in some experience. Otherwise, we are all students in the cooperative framework of what is sustainable. So our little homes and our big institutes, they all have to be designed as sustainable habitats. I mean, it's just not a few shelters and walls and pouring concrete and designing campus, but the people who are moving in those institutes, we may have an IIT Kharagpur, I mean, huge buildings, but that does not mean anything. But when Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan is walking the corridors of IIT Kharagpur, he came for the second convocation, then it's IIT Kharagpur, because the presence of Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan in IIT Kharagpur makes IIT Kharagpur. So it is biocentric. It is Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan centric. It is the presence of Mahatma Gandhiji in India that makes an Indian proud. And without him, half of India is gone, and without Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, the other half is gone. And there are, of course, others. I mean, I'm just giving a very crude example, but I think to a large extent this is true. So the spirit of consortium is actually the foundation of sustainable habitat. The other thing which as planners, urban planners, regional planners, economic planners, physical planners, all of us that we need to understand is what was evident again and again in Professor Vaidya's lecture, was the whole systems thinking, the whole systems. Systems thinking is today a very important thing. It's nothing new. It has already entered academics for about 40 to 45 years, since the day of Werner Heisenberg, Richard Feynman, and others. And today it has almost entered every field of knowledge. A little house with a backyard and the front yard, with a city urban scheme, with a water supply, with a connection and a good cooperation with the city municipal council, paying his water tax on time, then the water backflows and the used water goes back to the clarifoculator and to the waste treatment plant, is all about a systems thinking. So every house owner, every little child in the school, when he's being taught a subject on geography and home science and everything, a little bit of planning has to enter there, because when he comes to IIT Kharagpur or SPA Delhi or Central University of Rajasthan, he only advances his or her knowledge that she has picked up from the school. So the school has to be a sustainable habitat. Because it has to be a sustainable habitat, because the teaching in the school has to be done in that way, so that natural ecosystems and community resilience, so that every little boy and girl that the school produces is actually resilient. Resilient does not mean to give a punch and know some karate. You have to be mentally and philosophically resilient, so that if one system fails, you don't commit a suicide. Life has a lot of variety and heterogeneity, and you are always happy. There's a book called The Recipes of Happiness, Montgomery's Recipes of Happiness, and resilience is one of the features of that. So these are new discoveries in the West, but for India, for Gautama the Buddha or Mahavira the Tirthankara, these principles were always there in Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, and Sanatana Dharma, much before Hinduism or Buddhism, for hundreds and thousands of years. So systems thinking, even a Rishi's ashram was a systems thinking. If you look at Kannamuni, that Shakuntala's beautiful story, losing the ring and all those wonderful signature symbols of that story. There's a description of Kannamuni's ashram, that little pond and the fruit yard and the backyard of the ashram, the front yard where the butterfly is moving, and the hutments and the cottages where the boys and the girls are staying. They come from the brahmacharya, so that when they go back to the households, they have a training of restraint. So these movements in our way of life is actually the power of community resilience, which was already there in India. All we have to do is reinvent the will, which is already Indian, and it was a part of our ancient wisdom. So this is systems thinking. Professor Vaidya talked about this in some of his examples, and which is the affordable natural material. So it's not alternative material, because even modern material has to be combined with traditional materials. For example, I discovered from IIT Kharagpur, these white ants, they come only under a tree where there's a lot of water, because white ants have some huge symbiosis with the presence of water. So the white ant, जो बल्मीक का स्तूप होता है, जिसमें से ऋषि वाल्मीकि का नाम बन गया, that बल्मीक का स्तूप, I found out from local knowledge, it is one of the best dam-proof coats that you can put to your house. And this is absolutely wonderful. That means our traditional knowledge system that the tribal groups had in India for hundreds and thousands of years had an older idea of dam-proof system. And for example, the British came to India and they taught us English bond. But I think you all know, when Indus Valley civilization was discovered, it was found that way about 3500 BC, about 90% of Indus Valley buildings were built with English bond. So you may well call it Indian bond, not English bond. But it's not great to call it either English bond or Indian bond. What I'm trying to say is that the idea of brick building was always there for thousands of years. Nobody is teaching the other person. Nobody should take pride. There should be an exchange of ideas of natural building. And this is actually at the root of sustainable architecture and engineering, which are the tools of urban and regional planning. So we need a consortium to work on that. One of the most important thing is to make the system autonomous. That is Swaraj of Mahatma Gandhi. That is exactly what he talked about. So India was always self-reliant. It never invaded other countries. And when Alexander came to India, Megasthenes came to know, they were the first people who thought about an invasion to India. And they were absolutely taken aback by a country which has never invaded any other country. So the idea of invasion is not there in the Indian ethos. India is autonomous. On the other hand, India has invited people, that the Jews came to India when they were ostracized, the Persians came to India, The Baha'is came to India and built their large temple. The Tibetans came to India after they were ostracized, tortured. So that is an autonomous, self-sustained building. So the whole of India is like a edifice. Yeah, it's like a huge metropolis, and it can accommodate so much of diversity. And this is something which an average Indian must understand, because if you don't understand what India is, we cannot be Indians. And because today a lot of these ideas are changing, and we should revert back to Swamiji, to Gandhiji, to Gurudev Tagore, to Madan Mahal Malviyaji, and many others, to Sri Aurobindo and others, just not for the sake of reverting back to them, but to understand what this country is, Then only you can be self-reliant, Swaraj, Sadharma, Swatantra, I mean, these are fantastic words. The word Tantra is there, Prajatantra, Ganatantra, So the word Tantra is not a mysterious, superstitious word. It forms all the taxonomies of governance, population, and demographics. Prajatantra, Ganatantra. So these are the different taxonomies of population surveys. So these Indic knowledge system needs to penetrate our vocabulary of planning dictionary, because if we are not aware of this, then we are always imitating. And then planning in India is a Western model, and it becomes unsustainable. And that's what we have been doing, since independence. And a lot of people at 1947 did not listen to Gandhiji at that point of time. So at the end of the day, I'm almost coming to the end. We have to develop this network, and this is what Gandhiji talked about, the network of villages. Today we talk about systems of cities, but we should also have a systems of cities and villages, and systems of villages and cities also. Just not cities and villages, but villages and city. Villages has so much to teach the cities, like the circadian rhythm, get up with the clock time, go to the kheti, and come back to your house as the moon rises, finish your dinner early, don't have acidities and sugar by the time you're 35 or 45, be a strong person, make yourself sustainable. So one of the greatest statement that comes from a person who came to IIT Kharagpur about when I was a student in the late 70s and early 80s, that was Amos Rappaport. And he studied Indian philosophy, and he said one of the beauty of Indian philosophy is this, that it is not a philosophy. It is a philosophy which is a way of life. You breathe that philosophy, you live that philosophy, you work with that philosophy, you practice with that philosophy, you transfer that philosophy into products and visibles and evidences. That is the beauty of India. All the ashramas, all the works, all the khadis, all the cottage industries that we have is an expression of that. So Rappaport says one changes rather than changing the environment. So, look at Gandhiji, look at Gurudev Tagore. They changed so much, a great lawyer from Johannesburg, and finally he changes. A great boy from a richest family in Kolkata, and finally he's staying with the tribals in Shantiniketan. He changes, he changes. Look at Professor Chetan Vedra, the kind of life he leads, a simple life. So this is something that just not classroom notes and making plans and giving lectures, but the change that has to enter our own very life, then only become futuristic and aspirational. So this is the summary of the entire presentations, and there have been great thinkers. Gurudev and Mahatma Ji, they came together a number of times, and there's a huge convergence of thought. And there was a little dream that was done in Auroville, which was a 50,000 capacity city, which is neither a city nor a village, but Auroville. That means it's a city village. And this was a dream of Sri Aurobindo. But one of the greatest change or the contribution actually came from Tagore and his conversation with Patrick Geddes, the great environmentalist from Edinburgh. And this is what Geddes and Tagore had shared. And this echoed with one of the ancient proto-Greek or older Greek, pre-Olympian Greek philosophies, which is called the Gaia's hypothesis, idea which has been proposed by James Lovelock, which talks about the whole planetary system, the whole city region, the whole little house with the neighborhood. At every stage with a higher level, it's integrated. There's integration at each and every level, so that every hierarchy becomes a self-regulated, a self-respected system. So Tagore and Geddes talked about this at large, and as students of planning, we need to visit Tagore, Gandhiji, and Geddes a lot. I'm still visiting as a student, and every 15th day or 1 month, I'm learning more and more things. And I think it has a little impact on my life, and my life is slowly changing. I have just begun to realize a lot of things that I was doing when I was a student was not good. A lot of thoughts that I had practiced was not good. The way I treated my seniors, including my parents and my aged people, were not good. So this is education that I need to admit and practice. So we need to change every day, every month, and every year, and we need to go on. So we need to move from competition to cooperation. Only cooperation sustains. And I end with the wonderful word of Swami Vivekananda, a lecture that he gave at London. It is love which gets limited into that little channel. And by virtue of that, we kill the other person and we destroy the other system and we think it's evil. But when it comes out on the other side as a network, as a connection of systems, as a connection between various disciplines, practices, as a connection between theory and practice, the way he connected with Sir Jamshedji Tata and scientist Nikola Tesla in Chicago, then it manifests itself as God. The word God is nothing magical. When you become an extremely good person with empathy for everyone, with good practice, which is serving the nation and humanity as a whole, you become God-like. So in that sense, it is only in that sense, Gurudev Rabindranath Thakur and Mahatma Gandhiji were God-like persons. And it's no harm to call them as miniatures of God. So with this, I come to the end of my presentation. And this transfers and transmission alone is the philosopher's take, which is not a philosophy in theory, but as a practice, which will make our little habitats from a little home to a huge institute sustainable. Thank you so much. I hope you liked it. Yeah.
Thank you, Joy. It was, I think, it was a delight, as if I was listening to Gurudev's poetry. The whole prose and the talk that you presented from the heart. And I can tell you the few things that I picked up is, one thing, I have now greater shraddha in your philosophies and your teachings, and I'm sure your students are blessed to have you there.
Yeah.
And few amazing things that we talked about, and since we know that we are working towards implementation of so many things, Swadharma and Swadhyaya are the two critical factors that we need to know. And if everybody is taking care of the Swadharma, then probably this whole concept of sustainability will automatically be taken care of, be the change you wish the world to be. And so many things, I'm sure I think this whole lecture can become a good audio visual, and if you permit, I think Kapoor Sahab is recording this. I think if you permit, we will be sharing it with all our students, some of them who are not here today.
Definitely.
Kapoor sir is our God brother. He's our senior God brother.
Yes. And
recorded, but we will share with all.
Yes. Yes. So I thought we needed formal permission from Joy to be able to share it with everybody. No. I think now I'll open it to the audience for questions, if any. And
Professor Neeraj, we have some questions in chat box. I have sent you a message. If you can call, call them. Dr. Akhil, Dr. Dilip, of course, Dr. Mansi is there. They have given some suggestions, questions, some issues have been raised.
I have not been able to see the chat box, so I think you will have to, as a host, I think it must be accessible to you. Okay. Let me just see.
It's accessible to you also, but
no, I think I can see the chat box here. They're all wonderful observations.
Yeah. So they should get a chance to, so that everyone is enlightened with that.
Like I'll begin with democratic decentralization contrast with the market-oriented urban planning is one of the statements that Mansi is making, and what can be done to control urban flooding in the days ahead in terms of urban planning, rules, regulations, etc. This is a question coming from Dilip G. Patil. I think it is addressed to Chetan in response to his thing. So Chetan, you would like to say something on that? The question is about urban flooding. What can be done for urban flooding?
I think urban flooding is a problem of not taking geography or geology into consideration when getting urban development. If that is taken care of, and that would also mean a different kind of approach, not building more roads or more use of land, but how do we get open spaces which could take water in difficult situations, and all this, what is called sponge planning or sponge picture. That could be one approach. And not actually, few days is fine of flood. I'll stop at that.
Yeah. Okay. Akhil has emphasized that we need to really be talking to others, and that's what it's a collaboration and the cooperation that is important. The urban planners need to talk about microbiologists, biotechnologists for developing technologies, and so on and so forth. I think that whole process of departmentalization, and I would agree with Chetan, the controversial statement that he said controversial, but I think it's a very honest statement that the special purpose vehicle created for smart cities, which completely alienated the existing system, has we have not been able to reap the dividends of such a wonderful scheme, which we could have beautifully done. So that is something everybody is talking about unlearning.
I would like to share with you, you must be knowing, when in Rajasthan, Jaipur Development Authority Act was enacted, there was a court case with reference to the 74th Amendment. And even after more than 30 years, the court has not taken a decision because of lack of political will. Still, development authorities are more powerful than our urban local bodies or municipalities, only because of the lack of the political will. Why can't we abolish the development authority, merge them with the municipalities, when we have taken a decision by amending the constitution that these functions will be devolved to the local authorities, and in spite of that, we are not able to transfer those functions to local bodies.
I think that's true, and like Chetan mentioned, that even in the lands of Gandhi, the municipal bodies were not functioning as well, while in Kerala they are doing an amazing job. So I think it has got to do with the culture of the place and the people there. That makes one big difference. So also it was mentioned that our philosophies and our actions, they do not seem to be in synchronization with each other. So I think to that extent, there's a lot of things. I mean, like the 74th Amendment and 73rd Amendment. I'll tell you something very interesting. Till around 1998 or 2000, the training programs at Masuri Academy for the IAS probationers did not have an urban development module at all. Only talking about 73rd Amendment. So I think it was kind of a mention in various places, and I remember one of the conferences that we did that suddenly woke up to realization, oh, 74th Amendment is also for decentralization. So, so those are the things that are happening, and I think, Chetan, you would remember that few of the conferences when we put this up, and now there is a module in for. So I think there is a need for a lot of those small little interventions at various levels, and some of these things will come in worthy for us. So that is for sure. Nobody talks about devolution. States never wanted to give powers to the municipal bodies, and that's a bitter truth. While they were all the time clamoring that the center does not give them powers, they would not like to give powers to below, and they would not like to give powers to the blocks and other parshads and everything. So it became like the whole urban system, rather than having a systems theory, became isolated. And so the urban local bodies, when they came to Parshad, so what they were giving them, you can put 20 poles in your street. So what happens that there is no street which is completely lit. So different patches of streets. So So the drains, but when it comes to drainage system, it is a disaster. The drains start from one Parshad's house, ends up in other Parshad's colony, and that just blocks water there. So some of these things are amazing, and I'm sure we'll get over it slowly. So that in spite of all that, we are progressing. That is an amazing Indian mechanism, and we are proud to have that. So that adaptability and resilience is really true to us in that sense. Yes. Joy, it was a wonderful lesson that we have today, and I think everybody will agree that the two speakers outshine all the speakers that we have had so far in various forums when it comes to the sustainability aspect of it. And the reason being that both of them are living what they are talking, and that is what makes a difference. Just shaking hands will not make a difference unless you have faith in it. So with that, may I request for a formal vote of thanks for Mr. Shrimali or whosoever is offering it. I mean, I'm sure words of thanks will make a difference, but there is a formality that we have to extend, and really grateful to you, Chetan and Joy, to be for short notice. It's an amazing thing to have you here, and thanks a lot. And forum, I think Kapoor Saab is one of those amazing persons who just decide things at a city and they happen. So that is an amazing dynamic, and this whole thing is there. Why? Thank you so much. Shrimali, over to you.
नीरज साहब बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. आपने प्रोग्राम को अच्छा कोऑर्डिनेट करके अच्छा मॉडरेट किया, और आज के जो दोनों जो स्पीकर हैं बहुत अपना तजुर्बा स्मार्ट सिटी में चेतन वैदी साहब का एक करने का, और एज ए डायरेक्टर एसपी भी रहे, और प्रोफेसर जॉय सेन साहब का एक जो तजुर्बा है, जिन्होंने एनवायरनमेंट और सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट की जो बात है, ज्ञान मिला है बहुत अच्छा है, और हम और भी आपसे समय लेंगे, उसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद चैप्टर की तरफ से. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. कपूर साहब.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. It's a privilege.
Hand over to Kapoor sir.
And
all the participants.
Joy sir ka music.
Yeah, sir, Rajasthan में आ जाएंगे कभी ना कभी.
We have 10 minutes. We plan up to 17:45. Or shall
I
we
think we'll wait for
next
next time for the full what you call concert. We'll have half an hour for the musical philosophies of Joy.
Professor Gupta, I think within another 6 months, the COVID will be taking a back seat, and the next ITBI Congress will be physical, and we'll have a live show. We'll do something, and
yes.
Joy,
Yes.
no,
you can do something.
Joy, unfortunately, this year we are doing it in Feb, but that will be virtual. We are trying to make it international this time.
Right. Okay.
So that will be virtual in the month of February.
In the month of February, right.
Again, the SDG is there. The main theme is SDG.
Yeah.
Probably next week we'll finalize and we'll send the first flyer for that.
Oh, fine.
Okay, sir. Okay, fine.
Once again, thanks to both the speakers, Professor Gupta, Dr. Mansi. Once again, you are here with us. Thank you very much. Thanks to all the participants, and I hope that this kind of presence motivate us to organize this kind of activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.